that substantial. But let's talk about it anyway. Brittany. Now, you had a big influence on the artists moving from, I call them artists, pipers, drummers, whatever, in groups or soloists or whatever, leaving Scotland to go over and play in Brittany and that sort of thing, and maybe even the reverse, we can discuss that as well, where Britons come across here at your instance or otherwise. So a big part of your life though, right? So when did that actually start, Dougie?
Well, I've got to go back a wee bit.
Right, aye.
In the BP band, we were invited to go to the festival in Campere.
Okay.
In 1969.
Yes.
I went there to Campere and obviously met the Bagad.
Right.
And made a lot of friends, and socially and otherwise.
Describe what a bagad is to the listeners.
Bagad is pipes, drums, and the Breton instrument bombards, which leads to a very difficult ensemble situation. And difficult just to listen to when we arrived there.
Aye, because you're not used to
totally
this.
Different.
Yes, aye.
But it wears on you and becomes very interesting.
Aye.
So that particular year, I got really involved with the leading drummer of Bagad, Campere, and my two friends that are still friends of 53 years, Jack Corban and Raymond Prusinek. So during our time, I spent a lot of time with the leading drummer at that time, Michel Noddy. Sadly, he's no longer with us. And again, it was trying to get the rudimental side of his settings up a grade. So I spent a lot of time, and we met the then president of the Breton Pipe Band Association, the Breton Bagad Association, Pauline Manjari, who before that played with Campere, although he stayed in Lorient. So we had a great week and made many friends, as I say, and we started communicating. And I went back the following year in 1970 on holiday. And Hervé Lemaire, who was the president of Bagad Campere at that time, he got us a beautiful accommodation for the time I was there. But again, I spent a lot of time with the drum corps.
Aye.
And it did pay dividends because it came up very quick. And during that year, I was asked to go to Lorient to meet Pauline Manjari. I went to Lorient, to the Palais des Congrès, as it was called, and I met the committee of the Lorient Festival. And the BP band were invited to go in 1972 to Lorient. We went there, and again, a lot of friendship and getting to know different people. We came back home, and the president of the Lorient Festival and Paulig came to Scotland with Jean-Pierre Pichard at that time, who eventually ended up the director of Lorient. And we had a refreshment in a bar in Grangemouth, and they asked me if I would be interested in taking on the delegate for Scotland.
What did that involve, Dougie?
Initially, you know, the first year we went to the festival in '72, there was one pipe band, BP,
Mm-hmm.
a group of dancers, and a Gaelic singer,
Okay.
an Irish folk group, a Welsh folk group, and that was it.
Right.
And as the years progressed, it got bigger and bigger to, as you know, one of the biggest festivals in the whole of the world, not just Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional festivals.
Yes.
And things just transpired from there.
But what were your sort of, as to say, duties? What were you tasked to do with this committee?
Well, I had to arrange the Scottish delegation.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, as I said, pipe band, dancers and one singer.
Okay.
And I then had to go back and forward to Lorient
Mm-hmm.
to discuss future programmes. And it was just expanding through the years.
How did you travel to Brittany at that particular point?
By car.
Uh-huh.
There was no flights into Brittany.
Yeah, and that's what I was asking.
And
So did you take the car down to Plymouth and across to Roscoff, or
Yes.
did you go to St
Yes.
Malo?
Roscoff.
Roscoff.
And initially, when I took the job as a delegate for Scotland, there was no Brittany ferries.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, Brittany ferries, I think it was 73, I think, that Brittany ferries started with one small ferry.
Uh-huh.
And it was mainly for agriculture.
Uh-huh.
So that was a big plus. And again, it developed through the years.
Yes.
And there's just festivals, it started getting bigger and bigger. And it involved a lot of work for me.
Yes.
It was different days for what we have now, where we've got the piping centre, the certification in the university.
Mm-hmm.
I was going round about bars and pubs to
Mhm.
try and find decent folk groups, traditional music. And it just expanded. Through the years, I had maybe 5 different folk groups,
Aye.
4 pipe bands,
Can you mention any folk groups?
Silly
Yes.
Wizard,
Uh-huh.
Ossian, Tannahill Weavers, McCalmans, Capercaillie,
Mm-hmm.
Runrig.
Not bad for a start, eh? Aye. And what sort of pipe bands did you have initially? Did you aim for
Well,
first grade or
The
just
committee,
any
the
kind of-
committee were wanting the tops,
Right.
but there wasn't a lot of money.
Aye, well,
Initially.
I was going to come on to that. Say, expenses and remuneration. What's involved there?
That was one of the difficult parts.
Right.
You know, in these days, there was little or none of the folk groups full time,
Mm-hmm.
not a professional, apart from Runrig.
Aye.
When I took Silly Wizard to Lorient, nobody had heard them here.
Uh-huh.
But again, it started developing, and when they become professional, they're looking for money. But again, it was difficult. Grade 1 bands were looking for money. I took the information back to the committee, so eventually they decided in grade 2, try grade 2. So I used to develop, if a band had, for example, had just been upgraded from grade 3 to grade 2,
Mm-hmm.
I used to tackle the for them.
Yeah. But decent
And the
enough
assumption,
pipe bands.
and the assumption
Uh-huh.
that they were just going into grade 2 to level off and get the feel of the grade.
Yeah, yeah.
And it worked very well.
Aye.
And at grade 2, grade 3, a couple of times we were had 1 or 2 grade 4 bands through the years. But they then said, well, the festival by this time was growing rapidly,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a bit of money. So where I had grade 2 bands going for the whole festival, 13 days,
Aye.
they decided to have a special concert for grade 1.
Uh-huh.
The other problem at that time was that the dates of Lorient coincided with the World Championship.
Aye, right, aye. Mm.
So what we done was, I spoke to various grade 1 bands, told them it's a one-off concert and they would be back in time for the World Championship. So that worked too.
Mm-hmm.
And we practiced that kind of organising the situation for many years.
And by that time you were flying them in and out, I suppose.
The grade 1 bands were flown in, yes,
Yes, aye.
via Paris.